Welcome or welcome back, and thanks for being here. Now, the killer in today's story was so delusional that she even dragged someone else into those delusions with her. And these beliefs that had no backing in reality whatsoever would end up leading to the torture and murder of a kind and caring young woman. Sophie Lionnet was born on January 7th, 1996, to Catherine and Patrick Lionnet in the town of Troyes in northeast France. Sophie was described as a kind, gentle, patient, and rather private person who loved making other people happy. She also loved animals and working with children. Growing up, Sophie enjoyed playing the guitar, reading, and ice skating. Now, Catherine, Sophie's mother, described her daughter as someone who hated suffering and injustice. She was also passionate about preventing animal cruelty and was a selfless and generous person who had never been particularly interested in material possessions. Once Sophie had graduated from school, she went and completed a vocational course on childcare. And shortly after that, she was offered a position as an au pair in London. She would be working for a well-off couple who had 2 children. So after some thought, Sophie decided to accept the position. And thinking that she had found a very loving family to work for, Sophie moved from France to the UK in January of 2016. Sophie viewed this job as an adventure. Even though she might have been a little apprehensive, it would be an excellent opportunity for her to spread her wings and get out of her comfort zone. It would also vastly allow her to improve her English. Furthermore, she would be working with children and gaining experience for her future career. What could go wrong? So Sophie's new employers were named Sabrina Coider and Oussam or Sam Midoni. And they were French nationals who lived on Wimbledon Park Road in Southfields, a district in southwest London located within the borough of Wandsworth. Sabrina had been born in Algeria and moved to France when she was a child with her family. By the age of 19, she was manning a crepe stand at a fair on the outskirts of Paris. And it was here that 19-year-old Sabrina would meet 24-year-old Sam. Right away, Sam became entranced by Sabrina's beauty and charm. And he began to pursue her relentlessly. Soon, he became wrapped around her little finger. The couple's relationship was described as dysfunctional and turbulent, as well as marked by Sabrina's irrational jealousy and violence. Sabrina was said to be manipulative and disloyal, often cheating on Sam and leaving him for other men. However, she would always return to him, and he would take her back, no questions asked. Sabrina was also the kind of person who thought that she was better than everyone else. She was bossy, narcissistic, a big liar, and she thought of every other female in her life as competition. Now, in 2005, at the age of 22, Sabrina would leave France to go to London to work as an au pair. Additionally, Sam, who was 27 at this point, got a job in London as a financial analyst. Now, in many news articles, Sabrina is referred to as a makeup artist as well as a fashion designer, though she never sold a single item of clothing, so she thought of herself very highly regardless. Either way, the pair did well for themselves, and they were able to rent a flat in Southfields, which was valued at £900,000. Sabrina and Sam had 2 children, ages 4 and 8 at the time this story takes place, which was why they had hired Sophie in the first place. The youngest boy was actually Sabrina's from a previous relationship. This child's father was Sabrina's ex, Mark Walton. Neighbors would refer to Sam and Sabrina as antisocial and odd. In fact, they were actually not friendly at all. They were very inconsiderate of those who lived around them, leaving garbage sitting on the street outside their home for days on end, blocking neighbors' driveways with their cars, and not paying their landlord their rent on time. Sabrina, however, was still said to always look very glamorous and well-dressed. Now, on top of Sabrina's other problems, she had also been diagnosed with depression and borderline personality disorder. And on top of these already existing psychological disorders, she often manipulated Sam into sharing her delusions. And Sam was completely on board with anything that Sabrina said or did, no matter how off the wall it was. In fact, he not only entertained her delusions, but he fully embraced them. So when Sophie first arrived in London and began working for Sabrina and Sam, the children loved her and she was in her element. She also befriended many other nannies that were working in the area, of which there were many, and she was very happy that she had accepted the position. Even on phone calls with her mother, Catherine, Sophie seemed happy and excited. She told her mother that she got along with her employer, Sabrina, and they would often sit down at the table together and chat while drinking tea. And Sabrina, who loved doing hair and makeup, even gave Sophie a makeover at one point. Now, during the au pair's employment by the couple, she became known by various people in the community. Local restaurant owner Michael Cromer, who had actually been in talks with Sam and Sabrina about starting their own business, said that Sophie would often join them when they went to meet with him. She would sometimes visit the fish and chips restaurant alone as well, and when she did, she was very quiet, but that was just Sophie's personality. It wasn't long into Sophie's employment that this restaurant owner began to notice that she was struggling with something. Her body language showed that there was something wrong with Sophie, and there were times that she had gone into the restaurant with tears in her eyes, but would say nothing other than her mother was sick, which was not true. Then, on one occasion, Sophie went into the restaurant and told the owner, Michael, that Sabrina had beaten her because she dropped a stick of butter. And this was not the first time that Sabrina had been abusive towards Sophie. The abuse had actually been going on for some time now, and 21-year-old Sophie had slowly started to become thinner and thinner. Unfortunately, it was only after it was too late that the alarm would be raised on September 20th, 2017, by Sam and Sabrina's neighbors, who would call 999 over a foul-smelling fire that the couple was burning in their garden. And the neighbors were right to be worried because the bonfire was on the verge of burning out of control. But Sabrina and Sam just stood nearby, looking calm and relaxed, cooking chicken on their barbecue. When the firefighters arrived on the scene and they asked Sam what it was that he was burning, he just shrugged and told them that it was the carcass of a sheep that he had recently bought at the Wimbledon market. But once the firefighters had gotten the blaze under control, they made a very grisly discovery. The twisted pair had been trying to mask the smell of what or who had been burning by cooking their chicken nearby. One of the first firefighters on the scene, Thomas Hunt, saw what he believed to be a human nose and fingers burning in the fire. And when he began sifting through the ashes, he found burnt pieces of clothing, jewelry, and Sophie's glasses, all bent and twisted from the heat. Sophie's body was so badly burned that the exact cause of her death was not able to be determined, although post-mortem tests show that she had suffered fractures to her sternum, 4 ribs, and her jawbone in the days before she died. Her body had been so badly charred that it actually had to be confirmed via DNA test that it was indeed Sophie, which had taken 2 weeks to come back. As they began their investigation, detectives found that in April of 2017, about 15 months into Sophie's employment, her mother had noticed that her daughter seemed unhappy and fed up while they were on the phone together. Sophie had also told her mother that she wanted to go back home, though she had never told her why. Then in August of 2017, Catherine said that her daughter Sophie had called her and she sounded disoriented and upset. 2 days after Sophie's body had been found badly burned, Sam and Sabrina were arrested on suspicion of murder. And when the couple was separately questioned, they both at first claimed that they had been sleeping when the 21-year-old had died. The two did, however, admit that they had tried to dispose of the au pair's body after they had found her dead. And when it came to who was responsible for her murder, they began to point fingers at each other. Of course, don't they always? The couple had also come up with a story for their family and friends, saying that Sophie had just out of the blue decided to up and leave and go back to France. During Sam's questioning, he would tell police about an accident that had happened in the bathtub with Sophie while he was interrogating her. The reason the couple was interrogating Sophie was because some months after she had come to London to start her employment, Sabrina started having extreme delusions. She would accuse Sophie of stealing from her home, and then she would start believing that Sophie was not really a nanny, but rather a spy for her ex, Mark Walton. She was actually under the impression that the two were colluding in an attempt to abuse Sabrina and the rest of her family. So, shortly after these delusions had begun, Sam and Sabrina had begun to interrogate Sophie over and over. Police would actually find hours and hours of these interrogations recorded on the couple's phones. Now, the thing is, Sabrina's ex-boyfriend, Mark Walton, the one she had accused of conspiring with Sophie, had been living in Los Angeles during this time. He actually worked in the music industry and had been part of the former boy band, Boyzone. And the thing was, Sophie had never met Mark before. Mark and Sabrina had actually been in a relationship from 2011 to 2013, after they had met at a bank in Notting Hill. Mark would say that while he had loved Sabrina, she exhibited extremely erratic behavior during the time they were together. He would also later say it was the most turbulent relationship he had ever been in. Mark had also paid for Sabrina's nannies while they were together, and she had ended up firing every single one of them, saying that they had either been stealing or flirting with Mark. During the time that they were together, Sabrina had become absolutely obsessed with Mark Walton. And when they broke up, even though he was still helping her pay her rent and bills, Sabrina began to stalk Mark. And then, when he decided to stop financially supporting her, because she had gone running back to Sam along with the fact that Mark was unsure if their child was his, she decided to start accusing Mark of all kinds of crazy and horrid things. One thing that Sabrina had actually accused Mark of doing was sexually abusing her cat. She didn't have a cat. She also accused him of using black magic and having one of his friends fly a helicopter over her house to spy on her. Police had actually received over 30 different reports from Sabrina in regards to Mark, all of which turned out to be bogus. She was also given a warning by police for creating a fake Facebook profile and then using it to harass her ex, mainly accusing him of being a pedophile. So Sam and Sabrina not only accused Sophie of sleeping with Mark and being a spy, but they also accused her of being a pedophile as well. If that's the case, wouldn't you kick her out of your house immediately because she's working with your children? At one point, Sabrina would even accuse Sophie of trying to extract and steal Sam's sperm so that she could frame him for rape. Insane. But apparently this was just a typical thing for Sabrina to do. She would regularly accuse people of awful things, usually of a sexual nature, and she would pick on those who she believed to be the weakest. It is believed that Sabrina and Sam were suffering from the very rare psychological disorder known as folie à deux, or dual psychosis. It is a psychiatric symptoms of a delusional belief, and sometimes hallucinations are transmitted from one individual to another. Sam would actually later be given a psychiatric assessment, and he was found not to have any mental health issues, but for some reason, he had still believed all of Sabrina's delusions. In the beginning, when Sabrina's violent behavior had started towards Sophie, Sam would just leave the flat and go out for a walk instead of joining in on the abuse. However, it was not long before he began participating, particularly after he became a part of Sabrina's ridiculous stories. Specifically, that Sophie was helping Mark break into their home so that Mark could sexually assault Sam. Because of the fact that they thought that Sophie was colluding with Mark, the couple had even threatened Sophie with rape, prison, and even more violence until she finally made a false confession saying that she was having an affair with Mark Walton. During these interrogations, Sabrina, who said she knew very influential people, including ex-president Donald Trump, threatened Sophie saying that she would have her locked up, and at one point she even marched her down to the police station. In one recording of an interrogation of Sophie, Sabrina could be heard demanding that Sophie tell her the location of the house that Mark had brought her to so the two could have sex. Sabrina also told Sophie, "If you had told me, I would have protected you and would have eaten him raw in front of you," whatever that means. In yet another recording, Sabrina is heard telling Sophie that she can smell sex on her. Then, in yet another recording, taken on September 11th, Sabrina screamed at Sophie, "You destroy everything. I was trying to find myself again. I pray to God to not make me touch you. I don't want to make my hands dirty." In another recording made the same day, shortly before midnight, Sam likened Sophie to a French person who gave up the Jews to the Nazi Germans and told her she was worse than a murderer. The following day, Sam and Sabrina accused Sophie of helping the devil. Sabrina would also say to Sophie that she knew Sophie's dream was to become a star, and Mark would make her one. Sabrina also said that she knew Mark had promised her that she would move in the same circles as Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Cruise. Sabrina said, "He sold you a dream and you believed it." Throughout the recording, Sophie rarely spoke. And when she did reply to the couple's questions, she was barely audible. In one recording, she was heard very quietly telling Sabrina that she was scared. Sabrina had found a weak person and she had attacked. In the weeks leading up to her death, Sam and Sabrina had subjected the young, trusting, and naive au pair to prolonged torture, including beatings, starvation, and dunking her head underwater over and over. Additionally, in the 12 days leading up to her murder, Sophie was not allowed to leave the flat where she worked. Instead, the couple would interrogate her even further and beat her over these 12 days. In her final days, Sophie had been hit with an electrical cable and beaten so badly that she had 5 fractured ribs and a cracked breastbone. In a video taken on September 18, 2017, of Sophie confessing, she is seen in it looking completely emaciated and broken. Sam would admit that before Sophie had died, he had forced her into the bathtub and began interrogating her. During this time, he claimed that he held her head underwater repeatedly, as well as punched her in the head and neck. When he had punched her, it caused Sophie to go backwards and hit her head on the tiles. Then she had fallen unconscious and slipped under the water. Sam went on to say that he had dragged her out of the bath and tried to resuscitate her, but he was unsuccessful. But he would later deny these statements, saying that he had only made them to protect Sabrina. In a later statement, Sam would change his story and say that he had only found Sophie in the bathtub after Sabrina had woken him up and told him that Sophie had stopped breathing. In regards to why the pair had recorded all their interrogations of Sophie, both Sam and Sabrina claimed that they had intended on handing these tapes over to police as proof against Mark Walton, though it's likely they were going to use these tapes against Mark Walton as blackmail. There was said to have been a witness in Sam and Sabrina's home that night, though it's not said who. I'm assuming it's one of the couple's 2 children. This witness told police that both Sam and Sabrina had been in the bathroom the night that Sophie died. The witness described Sophie as screaming and splashing in the bath, as the 2 torturers told her to breathe. So why did Sophie stay working for Sam and Sabrina after all this horrible treatment? First of all, the pair had confiscated Sophie's ID card and cell phone. They had also stopped paying her in a deliberate attempt to force her to confess. Sophie had badly wanted to leave, but even if she had had her ID card and her cell phone, Sam and Sabrina had manipulated the shy au pair who barely knew any English, and they had gained complete control over her. They intimidated her, bullied her, and likely she felt like she was unable to leave. Sophie was also told that she could never return home back to France unless she confessed to working with Mark, and the couple threatened to have her arrested and jailed. Since the couple wasn't paying her, Sophie didn't have the money to get a plane ticket back home. So her mom had actually bought her a plane ticket, but when police searched Sabrina and Sam's home, they could not find this plane ticket anywhere, or Sophie's passport either. Police would also find a few different notes written by Sophie. In one, she said, "I want to go home. I want to leave." In another, she said, "Why me? I need help to stop them." The trial of 40-year-old Sam Moudini and 34-year-old Sabrina Courier for the murder of Sophie Lionnet began in March of 2018. The prosecution said that Sabrina's accusations against Mark and Sophie were pure delusional fantasy. And as for Sam, he was a weak, submissive, and pliable individual who punched above his weight when it came to women, as was demonstrated in his relationship with Sabrina. Mark Walton had also flown in from Los Angeles to London in order to testify against Sabrina. And he said that he had never even met Sophie and had actually never even heard of her until detectives called him after her murder. Another one of Sabrina's ex-boyfriends testified as well and told the jury that Sabrina was a fickle lunatic who would target and manipulate the weak. He said she could be as lovable as she could be detestable, and there were no explanations for these changes in her mood. She would just often shout and become aggressive out of nowhere. In an attempt to get leniency for his client, Sabrina's attorney told the judge that her actions were a result of delusions and personality disorders, which had left her with a rational and completely overwhelming fear that Sophie was conspiring against her and her family with Mark Walton. He said that her behavior towards the victim was entirely driven by Sabrina's mental illness and her desperation to obtain evidence of Mr. Walton's abuse. And while the judge acknowledged that the couple was severely delusional, particularly Sabrina, this was not a defense for the heinous treatment and murder of Sophie. In the end, the jury would end up finding both Sam and Sabrina guilty of Sophie's murder. Upon hearing this verdict, Sam just stared down into his lap, while Sabrina burst into tears. They would both end up receiving 30 years to life in prison. And during their sentence hearing, the judge said to the couple, "You were both involved in the torturing of Sophie in the bath leading up to her death, and making her think that she would drown unless she gave you information that you wanted, which was not in her power to give because it did not exist." And Sabrina also wrote a very bizarre apology note to Sophie and her family, which was read out loud during the sentence hearing. It said, "Dear Sophie, may peace be with you. First of all, I wish everyone, including Sophie, especially her parents and family who are suffering badly, to know how sorry I am for what happened to Sophie. We shared so many good times together as well as pains, until things went terribly wrong, and it ended up in this horrendous tragedy. I think of you every day, and I am shocked and sad that you are not a part of this world anymore. I feel like it's a horrible dream to me that I wish I could wake up from. Every day I live with sadness and sorrow. I am suffering every day thinking of you and what happened to you that dreadful night. I only wish I could turn back the clock so that it never happened, and you would still be alive with us today. I will now live without hope, and I can never imagine being happy again. I struggle every day, and I am disappointed in myself, as you should be. Sophie, I wish things could have been different, and I hope that you rest in peace with God. With deepest regrets, Sabrina Calder." After the pair had been found guilty, Sophie Lionnet, Sophie's mother, said, "Sophie had only just started to live her life. No one had the right to take it away. Sophie's precious life was not theirs to take. I remember the day Sophie left. I did not want her to go, and I was angry at her for leaving. Our daughter left us excited at the prospect for fulfilling her dreams. She was kind, reserved, shy, and had a small circle of friends. I did not think for a moment Sophie's life would end so tragically." And Sophie's dad, Patrick Lynette, also wrote a statement about his daughter, and he said, "If only I had known what would happen to her at the hands of Sabrina and Sam, that she would undergo so much physical and mental torture, that her young life was so selfishly and unnecessarily taken from her. I would never have encouraged her to leave. I would still have my girl. She couldn't stand seeing others suffering, and it breaks my heart to know that she was being abused to the end of her life. It was Sophie who suffered in silence, beaten and receiving wounds incompatible with life. She was imprisoned. Sabrina and Sam have not only stolen the life of my only daughter so brutally and without remorse, they have also stolen mine. My sleep, my happiness, my peace of mind, and my future." A celebration of Sophie's life, which over 150 people attended, was held at Saint Etienne Cathedral in Sens, France on June 6, 2018. These two people are insane, delusional monsters. And poor Sophie had no idea what she was getting herself into. She wouldn't find out who they really were for months because at first they hid who they really were. Sabrina loved controlling other people, And with her violent temper, she would have killed again, had her and Sam's cooking chicken next to a burning body plan worked. Thank you to all the patrons of A Wicked World. Now, there's even more of A Wicked World on Patreon. So check it out at patreon.com/awickedworld or use the Patreon app. You'll have access to exclusive videos each month and more. Any support truly helps to make sure the victims never get forgotten and to highlight the shortcomings of society associated with each case. Do you have a suggestion for a case you'd like to see me cover? If so, send me an email at awickedworldtruecrime@gmail.com.